Now let's take a look at our ghost.
Well, if it isn't our old friend Bluestone the Great.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the
Santiago Arata
of website builders. Somewhere in Montevideo in early 2019, a man wrote 3 words on a wall and planted an earthquake. 4 years ago, Uruguay gave us the second greatest upset in Rugby World Cup history. They granted the hardcore rugby fan a day they would never forget, and their own nation's rugby supporters the finest moment in their history, as some of Japan 2019's most iconic images spilled out of a country who were not the biggest, they were not the tallest, yet they came here to win. Juan Manuel Gaminara's team were impossible not to love, tears bursting from their eyes as the anthem exploded from their lungs and hearts before somehow getting even more impassioned once the game kicked off. They were a tireless team of pure drive and motivation, playing rugby that stunned in a style that shone and unafraid to cry again the moment the full-time whistle went. And all of this inspired by 3 words their head coach Esteban Meneses wrote on the wall a few months earlier. A mission statement that became a prophecy. Shock the world. And now, 4 years on, the same wall sits, ready for Meneses to adorn it with a fresh slogan, hoping to inspire results one step above what they accomplished in 2019. So, as we get closer to Meneses' second album dropping, what can we expect from everyone's favourite team named after a bird? Yeah, get out of here, Falcons! I don't want to hear about you, Eagle. Forget, what even is an osprey? Nobody knows. What games have they come here to win, and how have they been preparing this since 4 years, and just how proud could his successors make Gaminara of his country? It's actually quite difficult to sum up or boil down just how Los Terros' last few years have been. After their performances in Japan, it looked like the world was finally opening up for Uruguay. The team's raised profile allowed the URU to line up a home fixture against Wales, away games against Italy and Argentina, and start discussions about playing Scotland. And then, as quickly as they came, all of those matches evaporated in a puff of pandemic smoke. COVID cancelled their game against Wales. Argentina didn't play a home game for 2 years. Discussions with Scotland stalled, and only Italy went on to rearrange their fixture and honour their previous promise. Uruguay found themselves going pretty much back to where they started after signs they really could have been going up in the world. As beloved friend of the channel Gaminara once said, they were preparing the win over Fiji for 4 years. And yet, whilst those preparations had been stalled by outside factors this time, to look at Uruguay's results from 2016 to 2018, you wouldn't necessarily know they were brewing one of the most special results the game would see back then either. After Pablo Lemoine guided them to the promised land in 2015, the URU went, well, that promised land turned out to be Milton Keynes, so you're going upstairs, Pablo, making him director of performance before he ultimately left, and deciding they needed somebody new, somebody fresh, to take them forwards from the platform Lemoine built. And so, enter hot prospect Argentine coach Esteban Meneses. The first year under Esteban was pretty average. One huge win over the USA became a deserved headline, but the other matches were far rougher. Even the games where they were notable favourites ended up often one-score encounters, sides struggling against the likes of Romania, Canada, even losing to Germany, and yet, whilst the results underwhelmed, no game was wasted. It wasn't uncommon for Meneses to make 8 or 9 changes as he assessed his full squad, trialling combinations together as he looked to unearth gems. In fact, all 3 of Uruguay's try scorers from the game against Fiji made their debuts in that lost sodden year that was 2016. And as the campaigns went by, Meneses began to slowly identify his strongest side. Eventual starting combo in Kaimashi, Andres Villaseca and Juan Manuel Cat started 10 of Uruguay's 11 games in 2017 together, and Santiago Arata and Felipe Bacchese, the halfbacks for that game, played 5 of the 6 games where both were available. That familiarity built in time to smash Canada and get in as America's 2, instead of in the repechage shot they nailed in 2015. Qualification wrapped up 10 months earlier than the previous time out. Meneses now had more time to go back to toying around. The 2018 autumn tour was even worse than 2016's, but it didn't matter. Meneses had assessed his pieces and started to put them into place. This pretty much mirrors how Meneses has attacked his second cycle in charge. Only one player started all 3 of Uruguay's first 3 games of 2020, their first games after that last World Cup, and that was Rodrigo Silva, who was deployed in a different position for each match. Meneses' first squad of that cycle contained 14 uncapped players, and sure enough, it went reasonably badly, actually. An Argentina A side they'd beaten by several scores a year earlier, battering them, and Chile pulling off a huge win that may have just set in motion the absolute scenes to come. Yet their ambitions to build depth had one major boon over 2016's attempts. For in 2019, Football Club Atlético Peñarol, just one of 2 teams in the history of the Uruguayan Premier League to never be relegated, and world record holders for the world's biggest flag, started a rugby team. And not just any team, this was to be Uruguay's first full-time professional side. Receiving funding from South America Rugby and the URU and playing in SLAR, the new Pan-South America club competition, the kind of South American equivalent of the Heineken Cup, Peñarol were able to sign 26 Uruguayan internationals, snapping up virtually every member of the squad not currently under contract in Argentina or Europe to a full-time deal. The benefits here were enormous and are only growing as we get deeper and deeper into this. Not only does it mean Meneses now has 40 plus pro athletes on top of his European based players to pick from, even before dipping into the semi-pro pool he was reliant on before, but those combinations get time to bed in during the club season, allowing him to tinker less when the World Cup qualifiers rolled around a year later. The Esteban Meneses approach to rugby is to very much build a game plan around your preferred players, rather than pick players to suit a style. So rather than experiment, Uruguay reverted back wholesale to the team that brought them that World Cup glory 2 years earlier for the qualifying matches. Any changes from the team that took on Fiji were enforced by injury, retirement, or in a couple of cases, players changing positions since that tournament. Playing a very similar set of tactics to 2019, Uruguay managed to keep the first leg tight. Veteran fly half and channel favourite Felipe Borchese kicking extraordinarily well to get Uruguay back into the game after 3 tries that rank second only to the joke in The Simpsons on the list of most devastating things Americans have done to Uruguay, put them behind initially. However, come to test 2, with just 3 points eventually in it, Uruguay opened things up. There's a subtle addition of expansive rugby coming into this side since they qualified, the team adopting the now popular 1-3-2-2 structure deployed by pace-focused sides such as Japan, Australia, Ireland, formerly Wales under Wayne Pivac, this autumn just gone, and we saw shoots of this style in the second leg of qualifying. After plenty of crash at rugby in the same style the previous week, the other fly half called Felipe that they have, Echeverry, it's a Felipe thing, identifies this superbly here. Whilst at a glance the USA are perfectly aligned, scrum half to hard is filling in as a centre and prop Ainu is filling in as a flanker. Neither player playing their natural role, and Echeverry notes, this can quite quickly become disconnected. Freitas runs an absolutely phenomenal line here, looking like he's hitting the inside ball until the last second, switching outside, allowing Echeverry to draw the prop, and whilst Dahars can adapt, Freitas fights his way up to the line. Typical Nicola Freitas, he's so good at just that absolute tenacity. Arata then doesn't hang about, taking over and throwing a brilliant ball wide to Silva, who scores in the corner. It's an absolutely glorious ball by Arata, floating it rather than throwing a bullet simply because it's less likely to attempt to intercept, and knowing Silva has options inside and out if anyone does catch up. This is then a similarly gloriously constructed try. Uruguay invite captain Villaseca onto the ball, he smashes it up, and whilst the ball is slow, it doesn't really hurt anything. Uruguay load this side with 11 players, and 9 of them are all targeting the same man. Tavite Pete, a novice 13 with just 3 test caps to his name, who they feel they can exploit. Sanguinetti charges at his inside man to isolate him. These 2 just get in his way, and then Echeverry in his channel has 2 runners coming off him, one targeting Lepetti's inside, the other targeting his outside. Eagles captain Bryce Campbell makes a kind of horrible read, overwhelmed and just trying to help his centre out, and it means the gap opens up entirely. Mieres is through, and from there, it's a sensational finish. Brilliant skinny Hooley to score in the corner. Now, I know Gaston Mieres sometimes watches these videos, so I just want to say, if you are, mate, you're in sensational form, please keep it up. Needing to win by 4 points, Los Terras smashed them by 19, securing the Americas 1 spot a whole year earlier than Americas 2 would have been decided, and a further 10 months on top of the repechage. This was crucial, granting Meneses the time he needed to identify talent and develop that game plan without worrying about key qualifying games or anything vital along the way. There was one extra factor, however. Across the previous World Cup cycle, Esteban Meneses had wasted so much time trying to post his training regimes, his plans online using bloody HTML to build a website the old-fashioned way, but in 2020, Meneses discovered Squarespace. Suddenly, he was able to build and update new pages in mere minutes, crafting a website that looked gorgeous, the site looking incredible, yet up so simply, allowing him so much more time to focus on the other parts of his job, still over the moon with the website he'd managed to build. And if you want to do the same, please click the link in the description and use the offer code SquidRugby to save some money on a good old website at good old Squarespace. Over the 3 games this autumn just gone, Uruguay went wide on every single line out where the ball left the maul, except for this one where they ran a free phase move designed to play out similar to the Mieres try we just showed, overloading the blind side down the line. Typically, the Uruguay of 2016 to 2021 were quite old school in how they lent on their team's talents. If they had to kick or pass, it was Arata or Bachesi. If they wanted to crash ball, it was Villaseca or number 8 Manuel Diana or, one of the big forwards. If they needed to run a strike line, they brought in Nicolas Freitas from the wing or Rodrigo Silva from fullback or the wing, 2 big powerful runners out wide. But over the last few years, there's become an added layer of deception. Let's just watch this play once. Here you are, it's a simple play, looking to commit Burka and exploit the space outside him, requiring a key decision and a good pass from this guy here. However, if we now go here, right, Uruguay have their 2 playmakers, Echeverri and Bachesi, both make boring passes first. Instead, usual strike runner Silva wraps around nicely from the far wing here to create an option out of nothing and cause Burka to shit himself. The pass isn't great and it still kind of kills the chance, but it shows what Uruguay are trying to achieve. It's a greater variety in their play. They're not relying on Echeverri or Bachesi to make every playmaking decision. The next phase they then set into a 1-3-2-2 shape with Bachesi in the boot to pull Sanguinetti into a half gap, and if Landeca's half a yard deeper here, he's through. It's a clean break. And this is lovely and not the kind of score Uruguay were creating a few years ago. Echeverri hands it off instantly to Felipe Arcos Perez, one of the players brought in that torrid 2020 campaign, who has 2 runners here, but Tonga think they've cut off the outside ball. This is pretty good defence. So that's exactly what Arcos Perez throws. It's a brilliant line by Flanker Savetta, and number 8 Manuel Adal explodes off him and up to the try line. Uruguay recycle and Villaseca scores. They might have tried to run this move a few years ago, but it would have been with the backs because their forwards weren't picking dynamic lines and running support like this. There's an added layer of detonation to this squad coming in because young players like Adal, who I'm going to talk about a bit more as well, have the tools to do so. Menezes said he picked the entire 23 for every game at the last World Cup, more than a month before they even arrived in Japan, with changes only coming in the event of injuries. This allowed him to work out every single detail of how the team would approach each game, and crucially, for the players to learn that plan far enough in advance that when the game came around, they could express themselves within it, rather than being forced to recall what they were taught that week and run a very structured game. Uruguay last autumn ran a lot of moves that almost worked. There were a lot of fumbled passes and balls that couldn't quite find the man. But with Menezes' meticulousness and the team's never-ending passion, I do wonder whether we could start to see things really click once they arrive dans le France. But it becomes even more likely when you realise they're about to bring back in someone who is not only very used to being in France already, but arguably one of the form players on the planet right now, scrum half Santiago Arata. Now, when I highlighted Arata before the 2019 tournament, I pointed towards an upstart young Tyro who might be the man to make them, help them score more than the 2 tries they managed in 2015. And he made good on that promise, less than 20 minutes into the game against Fiji, and then continued to light up more Dupan than the Hatsumi Corporation. And so when Arata signed for Castres Olympique off the back of that tournament, they probably knew they got themselves a bit of a bargain. But I don't think anybody, not least Cast themselves, could have predicted just what a signing they secured. Santiago Arata is now Antoine Dupont. There's no other way about it. Santiago Arata now demolishes the top 14 on a weekly basis. Named in the team of the season above Dupont himself, Arata's form last year was such he not only ousted France international Roy Cocker from the 9 shirt, he denied him a send-off at all. The retiring club legend unable to make the team for his last home game or the top 14 final because Arata was playing so well. He's such a key part in them even making that final. This, from Cast's game against Perpignan at the start of this season, is a game where his forwards are being demolished. It's a one-sided game, the Basque pack in absolute ascendance. And then Arata does this. He steps 1, skips out of the 2nd, rides the 3rd, offloads. This is a team who haven't made a single line break all game, haven't had a single try-scoring opportunity, and up steps South American Anton to make the score even more flattering for Cast than that comparison is for Antoine Dupont. Because here's the thing. Qualifying as America's One has put Uruguay into a really interesting pool, containing France, the only team Frencher than France, the team closest to France, and Namibia. Now, as Australia, France, Ireland, Argentina have all taught us, the way to really attack this New Zealand team and how they defend is to target the fringes of the ruck. They play a defensive pretty all or nothing in that area, and it's allowed both sides like France to tie in enough defence around there that they can open up space wide, and Australia to make easy meterage through the middle. It's the real way to attack this All Blacks side. And Uruguay now head into the game against the All Blacks with a player who is bullshit level good, who specialises in attacking New Zealand's biggest weakness. I'm not saying Uruguay are going to beat the All Blacks, right? But the fact that Uruguay have a player capable of these moments is terrifying. Arata thrives on pressure being heaped on him by others. Whether the score's 0-0 or 50-0 in his favour or against him, Santiago can sliver through sides and make them look silly. I mean, look at this! Look at it! It's unfair! You can't just do this. If he does it one more time, Roman Underback's going to mistakenly sit next to him in the dressing room when they play Uruguay, thinking that's what Antoine looks like without his dressing gown on. Honestly. But Arata isn't only a freak in attack, he's also a brilliant defender who has that Dupont-esque ability to somehow make huge shots, as well as being smart in a way that could really benefit Uruguay late into games. Here, Arata resumes the regular scrum half role of sweeping in behind the breakdown, but after Racing target these cast forwards, preventing them from folding around to the next ruck, Arata takes it on himself. He sprints into position for the next, filling in a gap and shutting off the option of an inside pass. As Racing play on, Tabavao is hit by two men, but offloads to Russell. As soon as the offload comes, watch how Arata now sprints to catch up with him, telling the rest of his defence to stay wide. He smashes Russell and kills the overlap. We've not even seen the best bit yet, right? We've not seen the best bit. He chops Cameron Wokey, which in and of itself is a feat, but what follows is really smart. Racing, once again, target casts folding front rowers, opening up a huge gap here. Now, for those unaware, right, Nolan Garrick is playing 9 for Racing, and he is absolutely electric. One of the best up-and-coming scrum halves in world rugby, with speed and talent to create moments like this. He's real good at rugby. Normally, you'd expect Garrick here to essentially just pick this ball up and run under the sticks, at least go in the corner. Such is the size of this hole. This time, however, Arata lies on the ground between Garrick and the gaping hole he's grasping for. Arata's rolled away, he's just rolled into Garrick's way. The Racing man has to stumble and step over Arata, allowing Cass the extra half second to fold around, fill a gap and crunch Camille Chat. Knowing what he'd do in that situation, he's able to use that knowledge to shut it down. And this is exactly the kind of situation Arata may be faced with fairly regularly against France or New Zealand. With a man on the floor, Cass are really slow to react to his call for help, and Luku spots this. However, Arata keeps his cool under pressure and never bites in on Luku, allowing Nkosi to cover his outside and Usaraga to take Lamarat on the inside, preventing an inside break is just smart defending. Uruguay have very understandably been entirely written off for those two games, but honestly, don't be surprised if they give the All Blacks a proper game for quite a while, just as they did Wales in 2019 or Georgia did in 2015. However, those might not be the games Uruguay have in mind, because last year, Meneses told Rugby World magazine in an interview that whilst America's one qualification was always the goal, the moment he saw the draw, it became vital. Captain Andres Villaseca even texting him to say, we have to get in that pool. Now, I love reading between lines, and this comment has more lines than the ITV dressing room if they rehire Lawrence Delalio, because Uruguay's aim for this World Cup is not simply to pull off another win. They've said it's to go one better. It's something neither Meneses or Villaseca is particularly shy about. Their goal is to finish third in the group, and hence back automatic qualification for the Rugby World Cup 2027. And whilst first glance at Pool A, you might say, ooh, France and the All Blacks, blimey. Once you look a little deeper, this group gives Uruguay their best ever chance of doing that. Uruguay's first game up is against France, the host nation, a team they've never even played a full test against before. It'll likely be a fun game, a great occasion, but this is essentially just a warm-up to get them up to speed, to remind them what playing a big team is like, because the real test is up 6 days later. For 6 days later, they play Italy. In 2019, Uruguay shocked the world by beating the competition's most star-studded, celebrated, fan-tipped Tier 2 nation, the number one Tier 2 side out there, just 1 week after they almost beat Australia. In 2023, I think Uruguay are gunning to achieve their first win over a fully fledged Tier 1 nation. And you know what? They have reason to believe. Just 18 months ago, Uruguay were camped on Italy's try line, searching for the 76th minute try to draw them level. This was an incredibly close game, something reflected on a scoreboard that has so few legitimate points you'd think is a Clive Woodward column. Now, I have to precursor this by saying it was just Italy's third game under new coach Kieran Crowley, and they've improved a lot since, but it was still a really strong Italian 15 with the likes of Garbisi, Lamro, Negri, Fischetti, the whole lot. But Uruguay did a phenomenal job in defence of just shutting them down. Here, Italy play a dummy maul and Pastor Brayley stood in at 10. Negri carries hard and Italy all move into position, clearly running a two-phase move. Negri's crashing up so they can run something next phase. Their setup and the lead-in is almost identical to this, the move used to create Ange Capuozzo's decisive try in their win over Australia 12 months down the line. Identifying they're looking to attack second phase, Uruguay go, we've got to disrupt them at source. So Italy add 2 extra forwards, knowing quick ball here is vital. However, watch Nicola Freitas, the centre. He makes the initial tackle, then spotting the ball, just gets back up to his feet. Knowing he can't properly contest, he can't use his hands, but he goes to the kind of intervention that will make the referee shout, 12 away! Whoa! I don't know what that voice is, but not actually penalise him, and drives Fischetti's leg into the path of Brayley. Said fish leg managed to dislodge the ball, winning Uruguay possession back. This is not what Freitas had in mind, granted, but it's a great example of the way Uruguay were able to just nugget about all game. Every time Italy looked set to launch something, they just managed to get a leg or an arm or a hand in the way. Such as here, not 1 minute into the game, Garbisi looking to set the tone with a long ball, looking to just so, we're playing the expansive rugby today. Ardao is defending on the edge, and the ball remains airborne for long enough for the flanker to get across and make the tackle. However, instead, Federico Favaro rushes up from the backfield to make the hit himself, allowing Ardao to stay on his feet, compete at the breakdown, and win the first turnover of the game. Manuel Ardao has been a hell of a breakthrough player for Uruguay the last few years, and this is why the guy's a phenomenon. His anticipation is fantastic, and that's not the only time he does this. Here he hangs in the wide channel once more and waits for Mieres to make the hit, meaning he can solely focus on the breakdown. He's brilliant at identifying which rucks to chase even before tackles are made, often targeting smaller backs for turnover chances. This may not work against a team like France with baguette-eating brutes in the backline like Jonathan Dante and Gael Fickou, but Italy have a much lighter backline, so don't be surprised if Uruguay, and Ardao in particular, really target this area because the kid is outstanding. Uruguay's own try in that game was simply a matter of patience. Sanguinetti crashing over from short range to Meneses' utter delight. But if they can bring back Arata and Borchese, it could really add elements to their game. Felipe Echeverri, the understudy at fly half, very much the kind of second choice, also plays fullback, managed the game fantastically well, but sometimes he can't quite marry idea and execution when playing against the biggest teams. The decision to kick on the front foot here is excellent, but Ioani's able to cover the kick itself, and when Italy clear it back a few phases later, Echeverri looks up and instantly identifies the 50-22 is on. His vision's superb. It will be a brilliant bit of game management, but he slices the kick. If you can slide in Borchese, a 10 who's coming up on his 10th year in the Pro League, a league where not nailing your touch finder costs you an eyeball, and potentially move Echeverri to 15 when he played in the autumn, or have him coming off the bench to play more attacking rugby when he comes on, things could really cook. Borchese's kicking made for a man of the match performance against Fiji, and his brilliance from the boot inspired the comeback against USA. But if we're going to talk about kicking games, right, there's been one big change since the last World Cup for Uruguay in this area, because since the last World Cup, Santiago Arata went to play in the top 14. This kick is perfect, over the head of fullback Max Spring, forcing him to take the ball in reverse, backpedaling into his own 22. Spring doesn't want to risk kicking the ball out on the full in case the referee calls him back for carrying it back, so he has no choice but to kick it to a really well-organised backfield. Lebrun catches the ball moving forward, coming on the front foot, pumps it high into the sky, allowing Cass to really pressurise DePicho and giving his team an excellent net gain. A couple of minutes later, Arata catches Spring out of position once more, forcing him to turn, taking the ball, not giving him proper chance to look up and assess his options, and he kicks it out on the full, giving Cass a full 40-metre net gain. Or this is an even more impressive kick against Stad, with their pack putting him under enormous pressure. Yet he still manages to get the kick away. Just kidding, he makes a break again, because of course he bloody does. He's Antoine Dupont now. Seriously though, he does seem to be the master of this exact kick, placing it just 2 or 3 steps outside the fullback's reach, forcing, in this case, Hamdawi to fall over and giving his side the chance to advance, eventually winning the ball back a good 30 metres upfield from where the kick was. Uruguay scarcely box kicked, despite it being so on trend in 2019, but now they have Arata, a man capable of hanging them like this. And if Meneses is a man who builds his game plan on personnel, I think it's safe to say Uruguay might be playing a little more territory this time. Honestly, this is maybe one of the most on-brand things I've ever said on this channel, but Italy v Uruguay is one of the games I'm most excited about for this World Cup. I'm so up for that game. Los Terros' Everest waiting to be scaled on September 20th. But that isn't the end of their tournament. Oh no! For a full 7 days of recovery later, which is far from a given in the World Cup, Uruguay played the tournament's lowest ranked team, Namibia. Now, Namibia are a side Uruguay would go in as favourites against anyway. They won 3 of their previous 4 games between the two, with Namibia's only win coming in an 83rd minute penalty by the rugby player whose name pops randomly into my head the most often, more than anyone else, Cleveland Lyobsa, a few years ago. But not only are Uruguay the ostensibly stronger side, they're coming into the match with an extra day's rest and only 2 full games under their belt. where the match against Uruguay is the boys from Fury Road's final game of the tournament. By the 80th minute, Namibia will have played 4 games in 18 days, Uruguay 3 in 14. The odds are stacked heavily in favour of Uruguay securing one of the 2 wins they'd need to finish third in a desperately intriguing group. And it's not like Arata's the only outstanding player in this Uruguay squad, nor the only Uruguayan excelling in the top 14 at the minute. Manuel Lindecker, a second row who took the giraffe jokes too seriously, has been bossing the league this season as well, nailing down starting spot at Bayonne and really building his game beyond the exceptional set-piece foundations that he already brought to Uruguay in 2019. Both are perfect examples of what can happen when tier 2 players are given a go in Europe, growing into players way beyond what they would have been without constant exposure to top tier rugby. Captain Andres Villaseca, an inside centre who handily answered the question, what if Hadley Park spoke Spanish, has recently moved to Van in the Pro D2, where he will, funnily enough, join fellow Uruguayan Nicolas Freitas, who became a huge favourite of mine for his tireless work rate performances on the wing in 2018 and 19, but has switched to primarily become a 13, partnering Villaseca for club and country, though he's recently started experiencing some competition for that 13 jersey from Felipe Aras Perez, who looks to be a real talent, a kind of Henry Slade type centre, but I mean in his kind of ability and playing style with the ball, rather than because he thinks Bolivia's made of ham or whatever other TikTok bullshit Henry Slade's into this week. If Freitas does shift back to the wing, however, he will still face quite a lot of competition. Whilst most back three players slow down with age and shift from wing to 15, Gaston Mieres has gone in the opposite direction. An excellent fullback for the national team since 2010, Mieres, over the last few years, has seen a new lease of life as a razor-sharp winger. Whilst Baltazar Ayama, and yes, that is a real name, has been a breakthrough star this year, a Sevens convert and former child actor and star of 2 films, he's still very green, but he's lightning quick and has a great nose for sniffing out a try. A really great finisher, including scoring this last-minute winner against Romania in November. And despite the endless COVID setbacks, there's also so much room for hope for Los Terros to build on this success beyond 2023. In 2018, Uruguay had a total of around 6,000 registered rugby players across all genders and age groups. Now, they have around 8,000 junior players alone, and a solid 40% increase on senior males, even after the pandemic majorly stunted the momentum they were building. This kind of growth across the nation itself is necessary if the team is to build beyond their dream of automatic qualification, just as securing those results will only help them build the base of players they can pick from as the years take on. Because whilst we might not know what few words Esteban Meneses has written on the wall this time around, I think everybody eyeing up this tournament now knows better than to underestimate Uruguay. Because whilst they will never be the biggest, they will never be the tallest, that tireless team of endless drive is more than capable of producing moments we'll never forget. I heard you all calling that you desperately wanted a massive deep dive into Uruguay that would take months of research, and so I delivered. Here you are, a big deep dive. I hope you enjoyed it. There's going to be some Women's Six Nations stuff coming next week. There's going to be also videos on, I'm going to aim for every team in the Rugby World Cup later this year to cover them in at least similar, hopefully, detail. That's the goal. That's the thing. There's a playlist. There's one on Georgia already if you want to go out and look at it, as well as England and Wales and, you know, changing situations. Please go and have a look around the channel. There's plenty more to come. I want to do loads more on Tier 2 rugby this year because I find it really exciting and I love this kind of stuff. I love looking at Uruguay, and I'll see you very soon for that. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.